was it about the Mustang, and where did you get that courage or determination that like the Mustang was something the house could maybe go, not the Mustang?
Yeah, I think it represented so much to me of, feeling like I was trapped in the domestic world that humans expect us to live in, where you have
Mm-hmm.
a job and you have a mortgage and you drive a fancy car and
Yeah.
that's just what you do and that's how you live your life. And feeling like I followed that cookie cutter path, and it was just like almost soul crushing at times, just sitting at a desk and feeling like I
Yeah.
was just trapped.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I really resonated with the wildness.
There are healers on this planet with the power to soften the suffering of mankind, yet they have remained in the recesses of the world, abused, discarded, and labeled as trash. This is The Touch of a Mustang. I am your host, Shalise Clough, and I'm here to tell the story of wild horses, Mustangs, and the humans who are discovering and sharing their gifts while working to protect their well-being and preserve their spirit, so this divine power won't be lost. Join us on this quest with the Wild Mustang. MacKenzie Whitsell is the founder of Wild Ride Mustang Sanctuary, a hybrid sanctuary and training adoption facility for formerly wild Mustangs. She was previously a business consultant and software developer. She has over 30 years of experience in the equestrian world and uses predominantly opt-in positive reinforcement. The majority of her horse training, handling, and care is done at Liberty. A very timid equestrian and anxious rider, using consent-based horse training has transformed her interactions with horses.
I'm here today with MacKenzie Whitsell of Wild Ride Sanctuary. You run a wild horse sanctuary, and that's not how you started your career. You started as a business executive. So how did that transition take place? That's a pretty big jump from one career to another.
Yeah, I was getting really burnt out after a long time doing business consulting and corporate strategy, some software development, and I was just like glued to my desk all day, and it was not a healthy lifestyle. And I think my body just rejected it, and I started to get pretty sick, and I realized I needed a change of lifestyle. And so I had to take time off work because I was sick. And that's when I started working with the horses. And then, you know, there were some other life circumstances that happened that made the whole thing fall together.
So you're kind of working in this corporate business world. Is this when you started thinking about Mustangs?
Yeah, I was working, and that's when I started looking for a companion for my domestic horse, who I've had for many years. And so I was looking all over, and you just couldn't find a horse that was sound and healthy for less than like $10,000 in the New England area at that time. It was a really tough market. So I was kind
Mm-hmm.
of looking everywhere, and I was scrolling through Instagram, and I was on my trail riding hashtag, and one of the regulars posted something with the hashtag BLM Mustang, and that was kind of like the first spark. So I started researching that, and I started looking at the online adoption. And at that point, I didn't have enough experience to take on a fully wild horse, even though I'd been riding since I was 4 years old, and I've been around horses my whole life. I've always been an anxious, timid rider. So I
Mm-hmm.
was like, there's no way I could train a wild horse. I'm not a cowboy or a daredevil. I'll leave that to the professionals. So I was looking at the prison trained horses that they had on the auction at that time, and they went right out of my budget pretty quickly. But
Mm-hmm.
still, I had the thought in my mind of I really want a Mustang. So I started looking just in for sale ads for Mustangs, and all the while I kind of went down this rabbit hole of wild horse photography, and I was obsessed with the South Steens herd, and I was looking at pictures of them all the time, and I'd spend hours just scrolling through pictures, and I really wanted a South Steens buckskin pinto.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked and looked, and finally one became available, and she was in Oregon, and she was, fully ground trained, haltered, and her owner sent me about 20 videos of her doing grooming, picking up her feet, putting a saddle on her, lunging her. She was basically like your normal domestic horse. She seemed really laid back, and I was like, this is perfect. I can handle this.
Mm-hmm.
And then, it was an 8-day trailer ride across the country. And by the time she got off the trailer, I had a completely wild horse and I couldn't get within 10 feet of her. Um, so at that point, I had to learn how to gentle a Mustang.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of what started the journey of learning. And, I spoke to her previous owner who suggested learning about positive reinforcement and clicker training. So I kind of dove into that and started learning all about how that works. And I took an immersive online course for 3 months and read every book I could find and every documentary. And I was on every YouTube channel I could find. So just trying to learn as much as I could. And I did eventually, after 6 months, I got a halter on her.
Yeah.
And I just found that every time I made progress with her, she would just revert to wild, like the silliest things. And it was like starting from day one all over again. One time I walked out and I sneezed and she ran off, and I was like, great. And I had to start the whole haltering process from day one. And it was like, I'm not doing that again.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided I wanted to let her just be wild. And so I needed a place for her to be wild. So that was kind of what sparked the idea of a sanctuary.
Mm-hmm.
And meanwhile, I was going through some personal things. I had divorced my ex-husband, 8 years before then, and thought I was, done with him. And then, surprise, he he basically pounced on a clerical error so that I would lose my house. So I
Mm.
got some mail from the court telling me that they were taking, a 1/2 interest in my house, and they were going to force me to sell it, and I had to move out or pay them hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that was
Wow.
rough. So I was like, I need some place for this horse and for me to live, because I just didn't really know what else to do with myself, and I clung so hard to it. And then I kind of realized what was happening around me and all the things that were falling together. And I had a moment, after clinging so hard to that house that I had, you know, worked so hard putting together, and I made all the kitchen cabinets and I was obsessed with it.
Yeah.
And there was just nothing I could do. And it took a long time to come to terms with that. And then try to ask myself, what is the universe trying to tell me here? Because it's very loud and clear that I'm not meant to be in this house.
Yeah. And what was that experience like? It sounds like you let go of a lot of your expectations, a lot of, it was a material thing, but more than that, where you kind of put a lot of blood and sweat into it, sounds like, and a lot of love and care.
Mm.
What was that like to let go of all that, which had been, it sounds like good things in some ways, but was also maybe connected to difficulties?
Yeah, I've been through a lot of trauma in my life, a lot of loss and grief, and every
Mm-hmm.
time something happens, and it was an abusive marriage, and it was, you know a huge relief to get out of it and be done with him. And so every time something like this happens, it's what I like to call the trauma tsunami. It awakens every other piece of trauma in my life, and it's a cascade effect, because it's like, okay, well, I'm losing my house. I can't call my mom because she died. Can't call my dad because he died. And it's like this whole cascade of like all of the things that I would normally do to get support, and they're all
Mm-hmm.
gone. So I felt so alone. Aside from, I did remarry a wonderful man, and he's been my rock. And so he really helped me get through it without going crazy.
Mm-hmm.
There were a few moments where I was ready to burn that house to the ground.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so it got a little crazy. I was very close to snapping, and
Mm.
it was a really difficult journey. But you know what? It's kind of very relatable to the Mustangs, losing your home and your family. There was kind of a big parallel there, and working with Soji, my original Mustang, really kind of helped me process all of that.
How was working with her helpful in that process? I find that interesting just because I kind of had similar experiences where some hard life situations kind of correspond to my experience with my Mustangs and some of the lessons that I learned through both of those.
Yeah, I think really it was more about just spending time with a horse that could relate. And it's not like she could do anything for me. And in the same way,
Mhm.
I couldn't really do much for her because I, was really struggling with getting her to retain her training.
Mhm.
Um, and so it was kind of just spending time. We did get to the point where I could groom her. I had I had a stump in her paddock, and if I stood on a stump and I didn't leave the stump, she would walk over and let me pet her. So
Mm.
I'd stand up there and pet her and scratch her all over, and it was nice because it was a really good way to connect, just while respecting her boundaries and kind of have some time and space to sort through what I was going through.
Yeah. And it sounds like it was a lot all at once. How does that timeline fall from when you left the business world to enter kind of a slower, less, I would assume, bottom line business? So you left that, your marriage ended. Is this all happening at the same time in your life, and then this Mustang comes into your life?
So I got divorced many years before I left the business world, and
Mm-hmm.
even then, when I first got my first Mustang, I was still working part time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was basically a very flexible work schedule, and I was doing like 10 hours a week. I kind of faded away from working, which was helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, an important part of the timeline that I kind of glossed over is the fact that I had found a Soji, my dreamy buckskin pinto from the South Scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I think like a couple days later is when I got the letter in the mail saying that I was losing my house. And that was like, aside from the kitchen cabinets, the
Mm-hmm.
Mustang and the kitchen cabinets were the things I was the most heartbroken about. And I was like, I can't get a Mustang. I don't even know where I'm going to live.
Mm-hmm.
And so that really hurt. And after years of living with an abusive partner and all the things that he had taken from me, it was like, that's one more dream he just killed. And
Yeah.
it was just gut wrenching. And then, you know, I I had a moment of clarity when I realized, you know what, if I don't have to pay for a mortgage anymore, then I can afford to board two horses. So I'm going to get the
Mm.
Mustang anyway, and I'm not going to let him
Mm-hmm.
take this dream from me. So even though I didn't know where I was going to live, I went forward and got the Mustang anyway, and that was the best decision I could have made.
Yeah, that's incredible. What do you think it was about the Mustangs? Because I mean, that's a big jump to go from a solid housing environment to kind of, we're gonna kind of see where it goes and take care of my horses in the process. What was it about the Mustang, and where did you get that courage or determination to that like the Mustang was something the house could maybe go, not the Mustang?
Yeah, I think it represented so much to me of, feeling like I was trapped in the domestic world that humans expect us to live in, where you
Mm-hmm.
have a job and you have a mortgage and you drive a fancy car and
Yeah.
that's just what you do and that's how you live your life. And feeling like I followed that cookie cutter path, and it was just like almost soul crushing at times, just sitting at a desk and feeling like I
Yeah.
was just trapped.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I really resonated with the wildness, and you know, there was something magical about Wild Mustang. I grew up watching movies like The Black Stallion, and
Mm-hmm.
that was my dream as a kid, was to gentle a wild horse at liberty with food rewards, which is exactly what the kid does in the movie. And I was like,
Yeah.
you can't do that in real life. That's just like a Disney fantasy. But it turns out
Yeah.
you can. So that was really what made me want to pursue Mustangs.
Yeah. And so what was it like getting her? Like you have this dream horse that you've been looking at and you get her and it is not probably the way that you imagined it. I know for a lot of people that can kind of be when they just end up not keeping the Mustangs because it is really difficult. What was that like having that perception of what you thought it was going to be like change and still sticking in there? It sounds like your life changed completely because you decided you were going to stick with the horse.
Yeah, I felt a really strong need to not give up, not be a quitter. And, I didn't know what would happen to her if I couldn't take her.
Yeah.
And even if seeing how well trained she was before she came to me, I knew that there was no guarantee for her future unless she was with me.
Yeah.
So I felt really responsible to make sure that she was safe. So that's when I looked into natural horse care. Started thinking about like the paddock paradise concept, so I didn't have to trim her feet, and so she could kind of self-maintain, get exercise, live a natural, healthy lifestyle. And so I did a lot of research on that, and that was basically the sanctuary. Started with just a place for horses like Soji to just be left alone. And I wasn't at that point. I had only trained one Mustang. I was not what I would call an expert or qualified to start training other people's horses. But I was curious, so I decided to get another Mustang.
Because that's what we do if we like Mustangs. We're like, that one didn't work out the way I thought, so let's get another one. I
I was
love that.
They can't all be this hard, right? So
Yeah.
I need, being a data scientist, like I need another data point. So I wanted to get another Mustang, but my transportation budget was shot at that point, and it's so expensive to ship them across the country because I'm on the East Coast.
Yeah.
There were just no options locally. I don't think they even had an adoption event anywhere in New England that year. So I was like, well, I guess I'm signing up for the tip challenge. So
Oh.
yeah, I signed up for the Massachusetts Tip Challenge because that was the only way to get a free Mustang. And it was a random draw. I didn't even get to pick. And it's funny because you hear all the stereotypes about horses, and I'm like, I just want an easy one. I just want an easy one. And you think of like the red mare stereotype, and I swear I was like anything but a red mare, anything but a red mare.
Don't say that.
And of course, the red mare walked off the trailer and proved me wrong about everything.
Yeah.
And she's my heart horse. She is the most brave and fearless horse I've ever met in my life. She was wearing a halter within 24 hours.
Wow.
The neighborhood kids were like hanging all over her paddock. She was right by the road and the motorcycles would go by. Nothing fazed this horse. I thought she was like deaf or blind or both.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it turns out she was just so resilient. And so it was really interesting to see her compared to Soji, who was terrified of everything. And two horses who have been through this experience of losing their home and their family. And one of them is like, all right, I'm good. I survived that. I can survive anything. This is fine. And just like go with the flow, roll with the punches. And one who was just traumatized by it. And I saw parts of myself in both of them, to be honest, because I had always been the roll with the punches type of person.
Yeah.
And so it was really cool having both of them kind of side by side and working with them both. And, we did end up doing the tip challenge and had so much fun training her, and all of the positive reinforcement training that I had done really paid off. And she was perfect. So I was really happy with that. And I was like, all right, well, maybe I can train some Mustangs. So that the floodgates opened at that point.
Does all this talk about Mustangs make you wonder if a Mustang might be right for you? This June, MacKenzie is offering the perfect opportunity for you to find out. It's a 1-week intensive Mustang gentling clinic. You get to pick out a Mustang, learn how to gentle it with positive reinforcement, and then decide if you'd like to take it home with you and start a life with Mustangs.
And it's interesting, a lot of people say that horses kind of came into their life at a specific point where that kind of led them to the place they need to be or taught them specific lessons for that time in their life. Um, but like a particular horse would prepare them down the line. Do you feel like your Mustangs did that?
Oh yeah, definitely. If I had gotten a trained horse, I never would have learned anything about positive reinforcement training. I would have just probably sent her off to a trainer to get her started under saddle, and I don't even know what I would have done. But being put in a position where I had to learn was obviously one of the most important things to get me to where I was supposed to be. And I'm one of those people who believe that there's some sort of grand plan that happens in the universe,
Hmm.
and that this is where I was meant to be. And there's just so much evidence of that. And each horse that we have gotten has contributed to that mission. I can think, after a year, we had, I think, 5 or 6 Mustangs at that point. And at that point I felt like, okay, I kind of know what I'm doing at this point. I'm going to apply to be a tip trainer. And so I applied, and I didn't actually end up getting approved because they wanted me to wait for one of my horses to be titled. That's what it was.
Mm.
So I was just training Mustangs on my own at that point. And each and I had 2 burros also, peanut butter and jelly. They're
Mm. Oh, cute.
Yeah, I was like, I need the full range of experiences. I have the really difficult horse, I have the really easy horse. I need to try a burro. And so of course we went to get one and couldn't separate them because they were adorable. And they were just
Mm.
glued to each other in that pen. And so my husband was like, well, I guess we're getting 2 of them. But it was perfect because one was super easy and one was really challenging. So I'm like,
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
the hard
Here
burro
we
to be
go again.
perfect. So I'm getting all my data points and then figuring out the subtleties and the nuances of how you handle one versus the other, and the sort of like patience and customization that you need to put into a training plan to make the horse feel confident and successful. So yeah, and then it's at that point I was still kind of on the I just want the easy ones. And
Yeah.
that's, there are so many that need homes. Why choose a hard one? I'm just going to stick with the easy ones. And so we got my husband's Mustang, Martok, who, walked right up to us at the adoption event and was so friendly. And, he was very easy. So I was just kind of gaining experience at that point. At that point, we started to move the horses over to the new property. So basically, as we were figuring out our exit plan with the previous house and having to find some place to go, this 150-acre parcel magically
Mm.
appeared 15 minutes down the road from us. And
Wow.
yeah, we were like, we need that. So we had, at that point we were still living in the house, and we had horses everywhere. We took our entire front lawn and it was full of round pens, and our neighbors probably hated us.
Oh.
You're in a neighborhood and every square inch of free land was just horses. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, so we were like, we really need the land. And we started to move the horses over here and kind of get it set up as a sanctuary and kind of start to see the dream unfold with, Soji being able to kind of go off on her own and do her own thing. Um, and, you know, that's when people started approaching me like, oh, you're a sanctuary? Can you take this really challenging horse that no one can train?
Mm. Hmm.
And so I was still at that point kind of like, I don't want to bite off more than I can chew. A lot of
Yeah.
people do that. And so I think the first really challenging Mustang that we took on after that was a perfect scenario because it was basically a friend of ours who was an experienced Mustang trainer, but she had 2 Mustangs that she was like, I can't. It's just not worth my time to, same as Soji, not worth the time to have to start over every single time. Um,
Hmm.
and and she was like, can I board them with you? And I was like, oh, okay, that's a great idea. And so that's Hank and Rosie. And it was a good situation because she still owns them, and, she has a say in their care, and, helps with whatever she can. And it gave me more experience with the really difficult ones. And so it gave me a lot of confidence that, well, maybe I can handle the more difficult ones. And stop me if I'm going too far down a tangent here.
No, you're good.
But what I'm building to is that there was another horse that was meant to come into my life. And by
Mm.
the way, there are now 22 horses here, so I have a lot
Oh, wow.
I could tell. But um,
Yeah.
the one, that I really felt like was here to teach me something and belonged here as well was one that I saw on a storefront in Tennessee, had this beautiful blue roan pinto. And she was so
Mm.
flashy and perfect. And I was like, oh my God, I love her. But again, transportation would have been too expensive. And at that point, I kind of was honing in on my mission to help Mustangs that needed help. And I figured a beautiful
Mm-hmm.
horse like her didn't need help. She'd get adopted in 2 seconds flat. So I saw the pictures and I just loved her, and saw she got adopted like instantly. And I was like, okay, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I don't know, a couple months later, the storefront posted her again and said she'd been returned and was looking for a adopter with Mustang experience who could handle a horse like her. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, ooh, okay, now she's kind of like, she needs something and I could do it. And I was like, I can't afford to ship her from Tennessee to Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, she's still super flashy. I'm sure, especially with the warning that a Mustang experienced person needs to get her, she'll find a good home.
Yeah.
And she was adopted. And a couple months later, there she was again. And she was an hour away
Mm.
in Massachusetts. Um,
Mm.
and at that point, for whatever reason, I was still hesitant. And I reached out to her owner, and she had listed a couple of different horses, Mustangs for sale. And I still didn't want to get the flashy one because that's like, I want the plain bays, the ones that
Yeah.
really have a hard time finding a good home.
That nobody else wants.
So I
Mm-hmm.
messaged her anyway, and I said, without saying anything else, are any of the horses you listed better off in a sanctuary where they could have a slow motion gentling? And I'm like, I need a horse that's not aggressive, um, but maybe just needs to be left alone, or slow motion training. And she
Mm-hmm.
instantly responded, the Blue Roan Pinto. So I was like,
Mm.
okay, there's my like 50 million signs. So we went and got
Yeah.
her, and I have never learned so much from one horse. And I've never met a horse that was that explosive and reactive. When we went to go pick her up, I
Mm.
had never seen anything like it. She, you know, took off running, and she was in an indoor arena, and she found like a little corner in between a stall and a wall, and she ran full force into it. And I was like, oh my God, this horse is going to break its neck. And we
Mm.
weren't applying pressure at that point. We were just standing there, and she was just
Mm-hmm.
nuts. And I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? And we eventually did get her in the trailer. It was terrifying.
Mm.
And got her home and was like, okay, well, I guess this is the true test. And so I had to learn to be so creative and patient in my training. I would sit with her, and I am not even kidding. If I had my hands and I wiggled a finger, she would explode. And
Mm.
so you had to be so conscious of every movement, like breathing and just being really still, to get her comfortable and move at her pace. And so I kind of developed a system where I would sit outside of her stall while I was teaching lessons all day and just throw treats in her bucket and asking really
Mm-hmm.
nothing of her. And I was just sitting there, and at first she wouldn't eat treats anywhere near me. And then she kind of realized that I wasn't going to mess with her, and I was just giving her treats, and she'd kind of eat out of the bucket behind me. But if I turned around, she was gone. But meanwhile, her feet were getting really long, and she needed farrier care. And I was really worried about that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I can't touch this horse, but I need to trim her feet. And I was like, this is when the thinking outside the box has to happen.
Yeah.
So from outside of her pen, I taught her to pick up a foot and put it on a rock. And you know, slowly like just approaching and touching the foot from outside the pen and just
Mhm.
working on every little thing and breaking it down super small. And I realized that she was a horse where if she knew exactly what you were going to do and she had full autonomy over her body, she was totally cool with it. So
Mm.
we really broke
Mhm.
through that. And so since then, I was able to, I taught her to put her foot up on the corral panel. And I got her used to using the nippers and the tools and the file, and I would trim her feet from outside the paddock.
Wow.
And it I think was a really great trust building activity for her because they were getting really long at that point after months, and it was like she felt much better, and she was like, "Oh, you're trying to help me," and you could see her
Mhm.
trotting around with her brand new feet and feeling great and like, okay, maybe these
Mhm.
aren't that bad. And she's still a really special horse, and you still have to check in with her every time. You don't just walk up to her and halter her, but if you stand there with the halter, she'll walk up to you and stick her nose in, and then you're allowed to close it. So
Mm. Yeah.
we went, so far to the point where as long as I can explain what I'm going to do, by basically like I would pet the air around her and then step closer and pet, a little closer to the air and move my hand the same way,
Mhm.
and then like touch her. It started with like one touch on the nose, and just like really demonstrating what I was going to do, and got to the point where I can now, like, I can sit on her back at liberty. And
Mm.
that was like that amount of trust she has in me was really life changing, to see that
Yeah.
transformation and what's possible by using force free methods. And so, I don't know about, because apparently there were three homes total before me, and I don't know what happened to her in the first two, but I imagine they probably used traditional pressure based training.
Yeah.
And there are some horses that if they don't consent, you're not gonna get anywhere. And she's one of them. And so learning how much I could do without even being in the same pen as the horse really showed me that this is what I'm meant to do, work with horses like this or help people with horses, um, by coming up with creative solutions to training problems, and moving at the horse's pace. And all the while in the background, I have all these horses that are kind of just living their own life. And um, I swear it was like overnight, Soji walked up to me and was just like, "We're cool now." And I
Oh
could pet
wow.
her all over. And all of a
Mhm.
sudden she was just like, I'm in. And now she is the first horse to visit with tours that come through. She'll walk right up to strangers. And seeing that change in her is just magical. Knowing how many years I
Yeah.
spent thinking that I'd never be able to touch her, and now just
Yeah.
letting her have the time and space she needed to come around on her own time. She's a totally different horse. And, the
Yeah.
kids love working with her, and she's so calm and gentle. I just am so happy with where she is right now.
Do you think part of the change with her was due to changes with you?
Yeah, I think definitely. Like I like to a lot of people talk in the horse world about a species appropriate environment for horses. So
Mhm.
a lot of people are moving away from keeping horses in stalls, are learning to let them outside, the paddock paradise system. So, setting up a sanctuary for her, at the same time also doing the same for myself, because
Yeah.
humans also need a species appropriate lifestyle. And I think a lot of us
Yeah.
forget that, and we get really far removed from nature and movement and community. And we're all sitting at our desks in our cubicles, and it's very similar to a horse in a stall all day, a person at a cubicle,
Yeah.
working at the computer all day, not getting the exercise, not getting the movement and the stimulation that they need. So as I was changing her lifestyle, I was changing my own lifestyle. I was outside all day with the horses, and we've had to do a lot of maintenance and creating trails and creating more paddocks. And so I'm outside, working on trails all day, most days. And that for me feels like a species appropriate lifestyle. And it's
Yeah.
done wonders for my mental health, which I think she and I were on that journey together.
Yeah. And you said also somewhere in there you were having physical health struggles as well.
Yeah, yeah. So, and that's one of the things that can happen after a really traumatic experience. So, I believe the statistic is you're 3 times more likely to be diagnosed with an autoimmune disease if you have PTSD. So,
Mm,
it's your body's way of responding and trying to protect itself after a traumatic event or ongoing trauma. And so I was diagnosed with lupus. And it's funny because it's like you're fine while you're in survival mode and you're going and going and you're running on adrenaline and like I was doing great.
yeah, nothing you could identify was off at that time.
Yeah, and then once I was finally safe and once he was gone and I met my current husband, and I had never felt so safe and loved. That's when my health started to fall apart, which is how it tends to happen.
Mm,
And that's when, I was exhausted all the time, and, I was sick all the time, and I terrible anxiety. And I was diagnosed with lupus at that point, and it was my body's way of telling me that you need to make a change. And so,
yeah.
through all of this, and it's an important lesson for me and for the horses to be kind and move at the right pace. So if my body's
Yeah.
telling me I need rest today, I'm going to rest. If I go to work with one of my horses and they're not into it, there's no pressure. And so we learn to be as kind to ourselves as to the horses, and I think that's a really important journey to be on. And then kind of working through those health issues and getting to a point where my health is much more stable, because at first I had so many disparate symptoms and I had no idea what was going on, and it was terrifying. And I was like constantly ready to go to the emergency room, and I didn't know what was going on. And once I got the symptoms under control and I actually knew what I was dealing with, I was able to take better care of myself and move at my body's pace. And it really helped me connect with the horses. And it's funny how things work out, because there are some days that I'm too tired to move. And those are the days when I would be camped out in Blue's paddock and just
Mm,
sitting with her. And it's that's horse training. You can just There's so much of Mustang training can just be sitting peacefully and sharing space. And
yeah.
so learning to work with my body instead of against it, and not trying to fight when I don't have the energy to, and seeing what comes up when you learn to work with life instead of fighting it, and just kind of go with the flow
Mm,
and see where it
hmm.
takes you. I think that's a hugely important lesson that I've learned and that I'm still learning.
Yeah. That is something that is such a struggle, is being open to what might come that's different from what you're expected or what you're told to do. It seems like you've really embraced that. Was that difficult to move from, this high profile, high energy job into something that's much more off the beaten path?
Yeah, so I think what happened to me, and this is a problem I'm still working through, is I kind of swung too far in the other direction. So
Mm-hmm.
it was like clinging to my path and my ambition, and this is what I'm going to do. This is my career. This is my house. To being like, whatever the universe has in store for me is
Mm-hmm.
totally fine. Um, and so, now I've realized that a problem that came up after that was like I learned to trust the process, but to the point where I was like, Oh, that problem will work itself out. It's all meant. It'll work out how it's meant to be. And I kind of like, you know, began neglecting important things that need problems that needed to be solved.
Yeah.
I need to register my car. That's not a problem that the universe is going to
Yeah.
solve.
Right.
Day to day life, I really
Yeah.
struggled with the day to day functioning tasks of being a human in the domestic world. So all the bureaucratic things, and you know, I it's still a struggle because now I'm like I just want to wander off into the woods and live
Yeah.
my life and live off the land and not have to worry about paying taxes and all of that nonsense. But now I'm like I need to learn to find a balance, and that's really hard to do. And that's kind of the journey I'm on now.
Yeah, I agree with that. It really is hard to find where that balance is, where that good place of, not so hard on yourself that you're killing your body, killing your emotional and mental state, but also where we're just not lackadaisical, where we're still accomplishing good things and pushing ourselves and achieving things that benefit the world.
Mm.
It's a hard balance to find.
I don't know about you, but after hearing Mackenzie's story, I was ready to sell my house and start my very own Mustang Sanctuary. The good news is you don't have to start your own sanctuary. You can join Mackenzie's herd. For $50 a month, herd members support sanctuary horses, and you get unlimited mindfulness and hiking activities with, you guessed it, the horses.
So, do you think Mustangs have been integral to your healing? Sounds like you've done a lot of healing mentally, emotionally, physically.
Yeah, definitely. I really don't know where I would be if I hadn't gone down that path. And it's horses have always been a part of my life, and it's I've always known that they needed to be in my life. And but I had my domestic horse for a very long time, and she had a companion at one point who was like a fancy warm blood cross who did dressage and was used to living in a barn in a stall with an indoor arena, and he did not do well in a paddock 24/7 with a run in. He needed like 5 blanket changes a day. He was a very high maintenance horse, and he was not happy with
Hmm.
it. I began to question everything, like am I meant to have horses when I can't even keep this horse happy? And I ended up donating him to a therapeutic riding program, and he's loving life there and getting all his blanket changes and
Yeah.
all of the things that make him happy. And that's when my other horse was left alone when I needed a companion.
Hmm.
And I was like, I really need a horse that I know is going to be fine without being doted on all the time. Um,
Yeah.
and so when I got into Mustangs, I was like, this is the piece I've been missing my whole life. Is like,
Mm.
I just want to let my horses be horses. And some
Yeah.
horses aren't really cut out for that, and some were born for that. So once I found Mustangs, it was like this is the missing piece of the horse puzzle, and why I really just didn't know where to go with horses in my life until I figured that out.
Yeah. I love that you were able to keep trying and kind of looking at new solutions to this struggle that was going on. I think a lot of times people do kind of bow out of it because they don't feel like they know all the answers, or they're not able to do it the traditional way. I was definitely at a point where I was like, this isn't working for me to do some of these things I'm seeing. And so it's so valuable to maybe take a step back and see, is there a different solution to something where I can still keep with horses and do that? And you've really found some great solutions. For your sanctuary, you told me a little bit about how you guys run it based on a business model. So you're a nonprofit, but you're wanting it to be self-sustaining. Can you
Yes.
talk more about that, and like what are some of the things people can do to be able to help people and animals at the same time without just depending on the generosity that may or may not come in?
Yeah, so I'm a very risk averse person, and the idea of starting up a sanctuary and depending on donations, that was not going to happen because I didn't want to put myself in a position where I didn't have the resources I needed to take care of these horses. So, being with my business background, I basically wrote up a business plan, and it involves win-win for the horses and the humans. So we're offering humans experiences in nature. We do wild horse hiking, and we have a lesson program where kids and adults can learn about force-free horsemanship. And we're going to be offering glamping soon, so you can camp with the wild horses. So all these things are different revenue streams that go to support the horses. And at this time we're 100% volunteer run, so every penny we make goes to the facilities and the horses and our mission. But I'm at a point now where I rely very little on donations. We do accept donations, they are tax deductible. We are a 501c3. But we want to provide a value to the public and educate the public on the Mustangs. And, so many people are looking for experiences in nature. And so that's something that
Yeah.
we have here that we can offer people and give them an opportunity to support the horses. So, like, a lot of sanctuaries will have a sponsor a horse program. They'll send you a t-shirt and a picture of your horse and a thank you card, maybe some updates. But if you sponsor a horse here, you work with that horse 3 times a week. So you're out here learning how to train that horse. And,
Mm-hmm.
basically it's hands-on. And so that program has been really awesome. And seeing people get to make these connections with the horses, and it also ensures, if they adopt, that it's a really good fit because they've been working with this horse for months. um,
Yeah.
that program's going great, and I'm really happy to offer that, and offer value to the general public, and help support our horses.
It's an incredible opportunity for other people because, not everybody is probably going to sell their house and, buy 130 acres so they can have their Mustangs. But even just having horses, like, it requires a lot of sacrifice and specific circumstances and things. So, what an incredible opportunity for people to kind of step outside the very busy world and a little more into a natural world where the pace is slower and the outcomes are different, what we're wanting to see. So I think that's incredible. Do you have advice that you would give to someone who's wanting to do something similar to what you're doing, have a service or help horses, but also ensure that you can provide for them in a sustainable manner?
It's one of those things where we're still kind of working out the details, so it's not like I'm an expert on the subject. But I think it's a model that a lot more nonprofits should consider if it's an
Yeah.
option. Just because being able to, and the transparency that comes along with that. All of our horses are, the public sees them multiple times a week.
Yeah.
You never have to worry about if they're okay, if they're, showing up, not showing up on social media, what's going on with the horse. No, you can come book a tour or a hike. You can see them all and interact with them and see them progress. So I think that it's really good for sanctuaries and rescues to have these sort of public programs, because it furthers their mission. It helps create really great connections. And, it gets people involved who didn't think that they could adopt a horse. And that's a big part of our mission, is just making it accessible to people. And basically you get to try on Mustang ownership when you come here. And, that's not a very common thing. It's the traditional model for Mustangs is someone trains them, and, like the tip program would be,
Hmm.
they pay them to train them and they hand them off to the owner. And if you're lucky, the training sticks. But
Yeah.
a lot of really awesome trainers, through no fault of their own, the training doesn't stick because it's a new
Yeah.
person, a new context. So, by getting the person involved, it really helps to facilitate that bond.
Yeah. And something I think is really cool about that is that who we are as people does affect the horse. And so to be able to see that interplay and hopefully, for anyone who does adopt to be able to kind of learn beforehand some things that they can maybe adjust and change to make a successful partnership, I think is really neat.
Yeah, definitely.
As we're closing, do you have maybe a closing piece of advice for someone who is struggling or maybe seeking relief or healing? Something that you would encourage them to do?
I would say it's hard. There's no way to make it easier. It's like they always say, the only way past it is through it.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing is to be kind to yourself, and keep an open mind. And sometimes it's so easy to get bogged down in all of the negatives that you don't see the opportunities presenting themselves. That I think you just have to let it unravel, and to a certain extent, if you can, trust the process, and let what comes up in you flow through you. I think it's really important to embrace all of the emotions that come with these sorts of things, and it'll get better.
Yeah, thank you for that and for sharing your story, some of how you came to be with Wild Mustangs and work with them and be helping them. How can people, we'll include links, of course, in the podcast description, but how can people support you, find you, take advantage of the programs you offer?
Yeah, so you can check out our website, which is wildridect.org, and we have a Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, all the usual stuff, so you can kind of see what we are all about. And if you're local, come and sign up for a program. If you're not local and you wish you were, we now we have immersive week-long Mustang gentling retreats. So we have one coming up in April and one in June. So we have people from all over the country coming to learn how to work with Mustangs. So yeah, really, that's the biggest thing that you can do is get out here.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for being here. I just really love hearing about your story, and I think what you're doing is absolutely incredible to not only help Mustangs and even the view of Mustangs. In horse circles, Mustangs often have a very negative view that they're wild and crazy and dangerous. So to help people see that that's not the case, that they just function differently in our world, and to also provide that relief for people to get out of kind of what you were feeling, just the stress and strain of our culture today, to be able to step out and to go to really a sanctuary for them as well, I think is just incredible. So I'm really happy that you were able to come on and share about your work, and I look forward to following you and seeing where it has to go. And I'm inspired to see just how you've been able to create something that's good for horses and humans, and allows you to also care for the horses and yourself at the same time. So thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us and learning about horses that heal and the humans who help them. We hope you'll continue with us on this journey. We'd love for you to subscribe on your favorite platform and follow The Touch of a Mustang on any of the major social media outlets. Please share with your friends, anyone who loves horses, or anyone who might be struggling and could benefit from this message. If you have felt the healing power of horses or help them in their divinely appointed mission, please reach out. We want to hear your story. As we say goodbye, always remember that the horse is always there to help you.